Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for the Monday Q&As. Yes, there'll be a day early this week again, so let's knock this out. First question. What is the best way to decompress your back, especially the lower back? Jim does not have a reverse hyper. You really shouldn't be that focused on decompressing your back. If you really want to, for whatever reason, just go grab a chin-up bar and hang off of it. But generally, your spinal decompression happens while you're sleeping in bed. There are plenty of people who squat 500, 600 pounds, deadlift 600, 700 pounds. Their spines get extremely compressed and they don't have any real issues from this, just from sleeping at night. Now, if you're not getting enough sleep, that could be an issue. But generally speaking, if you've strengthened everything up in your core and your back and everything through weight training, you shouldn't really be focused a whole lot on spinal decompression. It's really overrated. In some cases, it might be useful. For most people, it's not a big deal. And again, just go hang off of a chin-up bar, because if you're strong and you've built any amount of muscle mass, your legs are going to be heavy enough to decompress it just hanging. Not really a big deal. All right, next question. What do you think of people saying deadlifts are not necessary for proper aesthetic back development and are definitely not the king of all exercises? On the latter, the saying they're not king of all exercises, that's bullshit, and I've got articles and videos discussing this. But as far as them being necessary for full proper back development and aesthetics, no, they're not necessary. You could run and do 5 different isolation movements for different parts of your back to try to replicate the same effect while doing 5 times as much work and spending 5 times as much time in the gym. The thing is that the deadlift is very, very efficient for just building up the entire development and thickness of the back. It lets you do one movement to get as much work done as 4 or 5 different exercises would, while doing one big exercise, and you'll probably get very similar results from doing that in terms of overall development. But with the deadlift, you're getting the added bonus of actually training your body as one unit, so you're going to get a performance carryover that's going to apply to a lot of other things. So we could still make the argument that the deadlift, while not necessary, is in most cases the most efficient way to reach the desired result, with some added perks that the other things don't necessarily give. And again, that's namely the full body power and strength that it gives you by training all of these things as one unit, as opposed to breaking each one down separately. And it's not to say that it's all you need, because in some cases, someone who wants complete back development for competitive purposes is probably going to throw in some of that other work anyways. But I really wouldn't recommend skipping the deadlift. While isn't necessary, it really will save you a lot of extra time and effort to just get in and do it, because you can skip so many other exercises or the volume on them by doing so. All right, next question. Best exercise for lagging quads, excluding the front squat. I don't know why everyone always thinks the front squat is this amazing quad exercise. I'm not saying it isn't a great quad exercise, but it doesn't compete with the standard high bar squat. The front squat really excels at strengthening the thoracic region of your back, your upper back, all of that, by trying to stay tight on it and pulling that over. It's a great core exercise, thoracic erector, upper back exercise. But as far as direct quad stimulation goes, deep Olympic squats, high bar squats will give you the best quad development you're going to get out of any exercise. That will bring up your lagging quads. And if you feel like that's not good enough, throw on some Olympic shoes, weightlifting shoes, and you'll find that your quads will get even more activation. Just do more volume or workload on your regular high bar squats, and your quads shouldn't be lagging as a result of that. Now, if for some reason that doesn't work and you still can't get it balanced out, you could always do leg extensions. But for most people, that's just simply not going to be necessary. The basic high bar squat with weightlifting shoes on should work wonders for your quad development. Just get really brutally strong on that exercise, and that will generally resolve the problem. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. Love your videos. I've been deadlifting for a while now, and no matter how correct my form is, I always seem to have the weight slip out of my hands. I'm not using too much weight, nor am I gripping the bar wrong. I'm not gripping it within the center of my hands, but more towards the fingers. I always try to train grip through static holds, but it never seems to work. Could this be a problem of weak traps? Blah, blah, blah. Let's just get straight to answering his question. The static holds aren't working for you. Don't do them anymore. What you need to do is focus on chalking up better, gripping the bar harder on your deadlift, doing more deadlift volume to improve your grip, and not using straps for anything. If you're really struggling with grip strength on the deadlift, you need to do everything without straps. That includes all your rowing, lat pull downs, chin-ups, pull-ups, every sort of pulling you do, you need to drop the straps for those and build your grip up that way. And the other thing you can do, you need to just get grip trainers. Static holds aren't working for you, so what you should probably consider would be any sort of like the rolling things, to where you'll see guys who they'll basically get a stick with a string on it and hang weight plates, and you roll them up and down. That's a fantastic way. There are other grip trainers you could do. Captain's of Crush grippers. I have a couple of those. I haven't been using them because my grip is really good these days. But things like that should help you get there. Do direct grip work, not just static holds, and ditch the straps. And your grip should catch up. Shouldn't be a problem. It's like you guys notice when I do deadlift videos, I'm not strapped up at all, and I don't have any issues whatsoever with grip. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I've noticed that when I deadlift, my quads burn quite a bit, but my hamstrings don't. Are there any common mistakes with deadlift form that could place too much emphasis on the quads rather than the hamstrings? Is there anything I should do to make sure my hamstrings are working sufficiently when deadlifting, or is muscle burning not a good indicator of muscle stimulation fatigue? No, muscle burning is not always the best way to measure your stimulation or fatigue. However, there's a couple things going on. If you really are feeling your quads more than your hamstrings, and keep in mind, you can build quads off of the deadlift. I'm not saying it's the best quad exercise. I'm not saying it will compare with the squat for quad work, but you can build big quads off of it. It does work them. So they could be a weak link for you, so they're getting more activation. But I strongly suspect you're dipping too low. You're pulling from too low of a hip position and you're basically squatting the weight up on your deadlift. And so that could be why you're feeling it more in your quads. So you need to get tighter and pull back more, tighten the hamstrings more right before you pop out of the hole, and maybe not squat quite so deep. And that should sort that out for you. But it could be just a case of you have really weak quads. But if you've been squatting pretty heavily and building up your squat, that's unlikely. So it's most likely the issue of just a form issue, not getting your hamstrings tight enough and squatting the weight up by dropping your hips too low on the deadlift. All right, next question. How to develop lower body strength and power without much hypertrophy? You can't develop strength and power without much hypertrophy. It's going to be proportionate. The reason you see high strength to weight ratios in strength athletes is because they've taken the hypertrophy they're gaining from the training and they've learned to maximize it and get the most motor unit recruitment out of the hypertrophy that they already have. But the reality is you can't add 50 pounds to your squat or 100 pounds to your squat or deadlift without gaining a very, very significant and large amount of muscle mass in your lower body. You just can't do it. It can't be done. So it's an issue of, if you want to try to just get better neuromuscular efficiency, so the most strength out of the hypertrophy that you're gaining, then focus on heavy explosive work, singles, doubles, triples, keep the reps low, keep the power high. But you are going to hypertrophy from that no matter what. And you're also going to find that just hypertrophying more is still going to make you stronger on all of those. So even doing additional volume and work to put more size on is still going to correlate more strength. If you're worried about it for weight purposes, just get leaner. Stay at the same body weight, try to recomposition. And so if you can lose 3 or 4 pounds of fat, that gives you more wiggle room to add 3 or 4 pounds of muscle in order to get to a better strength on those at the same body weight. And you'll still actually have smaller measurements because, again, muscle is more dense than fat. So if you're worried about fitting into your jeans or whatever, the problem solved there. But as far as not gaining much hypertrophy while getting a lot of strength, just can't be done. I'm sorry, that's a myth. It doesn't work that way. You just can't do it. All you can do is maximize your strength based upon your hypertrophy through neural efficiency and motor unit learning and working on technique and power. All right, next question. What are your thoughts on weekly undulating periodization? I used to not be that big on undulating periodization. I'm still not a big fan of daily undulating, but when we talk about weekly undulating, which means the rep ranges change week to week, so that could be something like doing 10 rep sets for all of week 1, going to 8 rep sets for all of week 2, 5 rep sets week 3, 3 rep sets for week 4, and resetting it. That would be like weekly undulating periodization, almost in a linear fashion, or you could even rotate it through to where you alternate them higher and lower throughout week to week. But yeah, the idea of weekly undulating periodization, there seems to be a growing body of evidence that is pretty decent. It might actually really be good for the hypertrophy-oriented lifter, and in some cases, a lot of strength athletes. So I used to not be big on it, but I've been seeing more data coming out over the last year or so suggesting it might really actually be good. And so I'm starting to think weekly undulating periodization is actually quite a viable method at this point for, again, maximizing your gains. And remember, guys, just because something is maximizing gains doesn't mean that you can't make tremendous gains on something else. When we're talking about things like this, of these really complex and intense programs to where you're doing things like a weekly undulating periodization or any sort of well-written out program, You're just trying to glean a little small advantage over what you would have gotten with a different training style. It's not to say that it's necessary or that it's going to make a noticeable difference in the amount of muscle you gain. We're talking about just trying to glean that 1% edge sometimes in a competitive environment. So there's no need for sometimes the recreational lifter to get that complicated. But yeah, weekly undulating periodization is starting to look pretty good according to the data out there. All right, next question. Dear Jason, do you believe deloading is necessary for a hypertrophy-oriented bodybuilding individual? Thanks. Yeah, I think deloading is necessary if you don't want to injure yourself, because we could argue about overreaching versus underreaching models versus like single factor recovery models all day long, and that you do gain a smaller advantage from the overreaching than deloading. However, the big issue, if you're training with any degree of intensity, is going to be injuries. I think Dorian Yates is a classic example of what happens when you push too hard and you don't deload. Look how many muscle tears that man had. He had like 7 different muscle tears during his career that had to be reattached. And so we're talking about things like connective tissue, particularly avoiding injuries of connective tissue joints, things like that. Deloads are really a good idea, even if you're training purely with moderate weight and higher reps. Purely goals of aesthetic and not maximizing performance. Still, from a safety and injury prevention perspective, deloads are still a very, very useful tool because they allow your connective tissue to recover while you continue to grow. So yeah, they should be taken into consideration and be taken seriously. You can't just go 100% all the time without ever backing down to let your body heal. You can't do it unless you want to get hurt. All right, next question, and this is a more personal question. I might discuss a little bit about myself here. Hi Jason, Jonnie Candito actually thinks you are scary. Thoughts? I didn't see where Jonnie said this, but I've had private conversations with Jonnie in the past, and I can definitely see where he gets that impression. It's kind of interesting because, yeah, a lot of people who know me in real life, I have a pretty big social circle in real life. The mere fact that my girlfriend is obviously in the fashion industry in some ways and does special effects and makeup, we have a pretty broad social circle. We are very outgoing social people, and so a lot of people know me. And yeah, that's the general consensus. Most people who know me are kind of like, I'm a very intense person, and it's not that I'm not empathic, or all the people on the internet who perceive me a different way. I'm not autistic or anything ridiculous like that, but I am a very intense person. I do have a certain mentality that's a result of my upbringing, because naturally I am probably one of the most caring and sensitive and empathic people you will ever meet. Like, I have a soft spot for children, animals, things like that. Like, I see a sick child or a child with cancer on Facebook fighting against cancer. I'm the first guy to get all teary-eyed. I see a hurt animal. I'm the first one to, get really upset about it. So I really have a soft spot for those things, and I'm very, very protective of people that I care about. And that's something that most people who know me know, that they feel completely safe around me. They feel safe. They know that I protect them, protect their children, things like that. They all get that impression, everyone who knows me. However, I do have that intimidation factor, and I do come across, especially a lot of other guys, as very intimidating. I have a presence when I come in a room, and that's been told to me by quite a few people, that I'm a very intimidating person, and I'm very scary in some ways, and I have to try to keep that reeled in. And that has to do with my upbringing and my training, because I'm such a sensitive person. My dad really went out of his way for me to not be a big floppy pussy, and he still sees me that way, which is really kind of funny. But my dad is really probably the scariest person I know. And without going into his full life story, my dad was a Green Beret at Vietnam. He later worked for, and I'm not going to say what agency, he later worked for the intelligence community. This is stuff that people can pull up on background checks, and people have done background checks on my dad related because of all the lawsuits and shit I've been through. And then my dad has worked in upper management for Cameron International, and he now owns his own company in the hydrogen and natural gas industry. My father is, again, because of his special forces training and later his work in the intelligence community, my dad is a very interesting person, and he really went through a lot of trouble to make me tougher and harder, and for me to basically be a killer. That he went through a lot of efforts to try to do that for me, which, again, my father being who he was, it led to some interesting career opportunities later in life. But because of those life experiences, in a way, I'm really a damaged person in a lot of ways. And yes, I did crack under the PTSD from some of the work I did later, which, again, I can't discuss with you guys. I got to see some interesting things in life, but if I talk about it, I'll spend the rest of my life in prison. But it gave me an interesting perspective on life. And yeah, I'm a very damaged person as a result of that. I don't hold human life in the same value that a lot of people do. It doesn't have a whole lot of meaning to me. And a lot of people kind of get that impression who meet me, particularly veterans and things, definitely pick up my 1,000-yard stare and stuff. So I have that certain intimidation, and even though I'm really a big softie when it comes down to it. But yeah, I do have this very scary, intimidating streak to me that comes out, and some of it has to do with my perspective, my actual life perspective when it comes to dealing with people who I see as any sort of threat to me or anyone I care about is pretty extreme by most standards. And yeah, people pick up on that. And so certain people, even just private conversations I've had with them, probably think I'm a little crazy, a little bit scary. And I can definitely see from conversations I had with Candito as to why he might have that perspective. All right, next question and last question of the week. And this one's more of a drug-related question. So you guys who aren't interested in that can go ahead and tune out. Any information on why tren was never approved for human use? Its long-term use of tren as bad as blasting a gram of test? Actually, tren was approved for human use in Europe at one time. That's actually one of the reasons it got pushed out there. It's used now mostly for agricultural use and livestock. But there have been studies, actually discussions in recent years and studies done on rats at least, that are promoting the idea of maybe using trenbolone as an alternative to TRT for human males. And there have been animal trials done on this because it has some advantages of they can get all the sex drive, some of the bone mineralization and everything off of a much lower dose of it than they can off of testosterone. Also without any risk of things like prostate hypertrophy, because what they found is like possibly 50 milligrams or 75 milligrams of tren a week could yield the full sex drive and mood benefits of the 150 milligrams of testosterone for low testosterone males, but without the risk of things like hypertrophy of the prostate and without some of the DHT related issues because trenbolone doesn't convert to DHT. The only issue is that there is some concerns that it might have a more negative effect on lipid profile. But yeah, in terms of therapeutic use for humans, there is actually real discussion out there on this. And there is research on animals, at least, looking into this with consideration of human trials in the future of actually using low-dose trenbolone as a viable form of testosterone replacement therapy. So it may happen, to be honest. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.